Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our top stories. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has pledged a £2 billion loan for Ukraine to make weapons amid global tensions over the Russia-Ukraine war. A defence summit with European and Canadian leaders is set to take place shortly following Trump and Zelensky's clash in Washington. Israel has stopped all aid from entering Gaza after Hamas reportedly refused to a 6-week ceasefire extension after the end of Phase 1 of the initial deal. Israel has approved the US plan, which would have covered the Muslim Ramadan and Jewish Passover periods. President Trump has ordered a trade investigation that could see additional tariffs on imported lumber. Meanwhile, the Treasury chief has urged Canada and Mexico to match US tariffs on China ahead of America's Tuesday deadline for 25% tariffs on their border nations. A US judge has declared that Trump's firing of the watchdog agency's head was illegal. Meanwhile, the Trump administration has sent a second round of emails demanding a summary of the work carried out by government employees. Israel has suspended all humanitarian aid to Gaza, urging Hamas to agree to a temporary ceasefire deal. Israel has backed a US proposal to extend the Gaza truce temporarily, covering Ramadan and Passover as a bridging measure after the first phase of the ceasefire ended. Here is a full report on the latest developments in the conflict.
Israel has stopped the entry of all humanitarian aid into Gaza after Phase 1 of its ceasefire deal with Hamas expired, citing the militant group's refusal of a US-backed extension. Israel blocked aid trucks to Gaza as truce tensions escalated, with Hamas urging Egyptian and Qatari mediation. Since January 20th, the Trump administration approved nearly $12 billion in major foreign military sales to Israel. On February 28th, the US approved the potential sale of nearly $3 billion worth of bombs, demolition kits and other weaponry to Israel. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio signed a declaration to expedite the delivery of approximately $4 billion in military assistance to Israel. Hours before the first phase of the ceasefire expired, Israel agreed to a temporary ceasefire in Gaza during Ramadan and Passover, based on a proposal by Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff. Israel and Hamas accused each other of violating the ceasefire, raising doubts about the second phase of the deal, which was meant to involve additional hostage and prisoner releases and steps toward a permanent end to the war. Palestinian Muslim worshippers performed night prayers, known as Tarawih, at a mosque in central Gaza's Al-Zawayda on the first day of Ramadan. On March 1st, Israelis rallied in Tel Aviv's Hostages Square as part of their weekly protest, demanding the return of all hostages held in Gaza in a single phase. The latest update is that families of hostages held in Gaza are urging Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to proceed to the second phase of the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Time will determine how things unfold in second phase. The Bureau Report, NewsX World.
Let's now take a look at the latest updates from across North America. A majority of Republicans support President Donald Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance following their heated Oval Office confrontation with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Senator Lindsey Graham went as far as asking Zelensky to resign, while others attacked Trump for allegedly joining forces with Putin. Some Republicans and Democrats condemned Trump's handling of the Ukrainian leader as a backward step for US foreign policy. Meanwhile, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is in London for a defence summit to talk about long-term security promises for Ukraine in the face of heightened tensions with Russia. Trudeau wants to ensure that Canada remains relevant to European security as the United States withdraws. He is expected to emphasise solidarity and call for actions like responses to Trump's economic coercion. Trudeau will also talk about alternatives to US military purchases. Former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, who stepped down in 2021 over allegations of sexual misconduct, has announced his bid to become New York City Mayor. Cuomo made the announcement in a 17-minute video stating that the city is in crisis and needs effective leadership. Cuomo's entry puts pressure on current Mayor Eric Adams, who is facing federal corruption charges. Some admire Cuomo's strong leadership, while others worry that his return will be detrimental to women's rights. Google co-founder Sergey Brin has declared that a 60-hour work week is the sweet spot for productivity, particularly for workers engaged on the company's Gemini AI projects. His memo generated dividend responses, with some defending his commitment, while others criticised the concept, cautioning that it would bring about burnouts. The debate also brought forth concerns that AI could replace employees' jobs. 9 individuals were taken into custody outside of a New York Tesla store. Nationwide protests have been directed at Elon Musk's involvement in Trump's broad federal job cuts. Protesters blame Musk for leading large-scale layoffs through the Department of Government Efficiency, which prompted rallies in several cities. Protesters demanded a boycott of Tesla, calling for accountability from the administration's controversial actions. Staying in America, and President Donald Trump calls for an investigation into potential lumber import tariffs to boost domestic supply. This move could heighten global trade tensions. Meanwhile, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent urges Canada to align with Mexico on US tariffs against Chinese goods.
On Saturday, US President Donald Trump called for an investigation into possible tariffs on lumber imports to strengthen domestic supply. This is a move that could further escalate trade tensions. Trump issued an executive order directing Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick to launch an investigation into how imports of timber, lumber, and related products impact national security. The investigation could lead to the introduction of additional tariffs, adding to the current duties already in place. The probe targets exporters such as Canada, Germany, and Brazil. White House officials previously accused these countries of flooding their markets with cheap lumber, harming both their economic prosperity and national security. Meanwhile, on Friday, US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent urged Canada to align with Mexico in adopting US tariffs on Chinese goods, as both countries work to avoid the 25% US tariff set to take effect on Tuesday over fentanyl trafficking, while Canadian opposition party leaders have a different vision.
By being clear, we will never, ever be part of the United States in any way, shape, or form. We have to recognize that the Donald Trump of today is different than the Donald Trump of several years ago. Then his objective was to take more of our market. Now he wants to take our country. Let me finish by pointing out one other thing. Who's the worst person to stand up to Donald Trump? It's Pierre Poilievre. He worships the man. He uses his language. He's not the right person for our country at this crucial time.
Bessent told reporters that Mexico proposed matching US tariffs on Chinese goods, but did not clarify the exact rate. Trump had introduced a 10% tariff on all Chinese imports on February 4th, later stating it would rise to 20% from Tuesday. The governments of Mexico and Canada have not responded to Bessent's statements yet. Bureau Report, NewsX World.
We'll now look at the latest from across the continent of Europe. French President Emmanuel Macron has spoken with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and US President Donald Trump, calling for calm following Friday's clash at the White House. Meanwhile, Macron has also talked with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, European Council President Antonio Costa, and NATO Chief Mark Rutte on the issue. Meanwhile, Trump has threatened to withdraw support for Ukraine. Macron and Starmer have been trying to convince Trump not to rush a ceasefire. Pope Francis has been cooperating with physiotherapy and his circulation has remained stable. The 88-year-old pontiff has been battling pneumonia in hospital for over 2 weeks. He experienced a breathing crisis but is now believed to be in a stable condition. The Vatican says he has responded well to oxygen therapy and has not suffered any further crises. Mass demonstrations have taken place in Serbia. Protests have been intensifying over the past 4 months after a railway station roof collapsed in Novi Sad, where 15 people died. Many Serbians have blamed the collapse on corruption. They say it's linked to President Aleksandar Vučić's time in office. Teachers, farmers and other workers have joined student protests. Ahead of this, Prime Minister Miloš Vuković and 2 other ministers have resigned. Demonstrations have taken place in Belgrade and other towns. The family of a 30-year-old father of 4 who died on holiday in Benidorm are flying to Spain for answers from local authorities. Nathan Osman's body was found at the bottom of a cliff less than 24 hours after he arrived on holiday in September last year. Nathan's family say his bank card was used the day after his death, with his relatives questioning if others were involved. Spanish authorities have agreed to meet the family. The PKK declared a ceasefire following Abdullah Öcalan's call for disarmament and peace, urging Turkey to create democratic conditions. While Erdogan sees potential for peace, he warns military actions will continue if the ceasefire fails, with ongoing PKK attacks inside Turkey. Here's the latest.
Kurdish militants of the Kurdistan Workers' Party declared a ceasefire on Saturday, following a call from their imprisoned leader Abdullah Öcalan for disarmament. This move could significantly impact President Erdogan's government, with Öcalan urging peace and a democratic society. Erdogan, however, warned that Turkey would maintain military readiness if the ceasefire fails, stating that operations would continue until the last terrorist is eliminated. The PKK emphasized the need for democratic and legal conditions to ensure success, calling for Öcalan's release to lead the disarmament process. This ceasefire marks a breakthrough in the conflict, but it is uncertain whether it will lead to a lasting resolution. Erdogan sees Öcalan's call as a potential historic step toward peace, and political meetings are planned to clarify the next steps.
Bundan sonra da nefret dili, kavga ve gerilim yerine karşılıklı saygıyı, hoşgörüyü ve diyaloğu gözetmeye devam edeceğiz. Fakat uzattığımız elin havada bırakılması veya ısırılması halinde de demir yumruğumuzu daima.
Despite the ceasefire, Turkey insists that all Kurdish groups linked to the PKK across the region must disband, and isolated attacks by the PKK continue inside Turkey, while Kurdish fighters in Syria remain unaffected by the ceasefire. Bureau Report, NewsX World.
We'll now take a look at the latest from South America. Yamandu Orsi has been sworn in as Uruguay's new president. The leftist's former mayor and history teacher takes charge while promising to strengthen the social safety net and revive the country's struggling economy. His inauguration marks the broad front's return to power in Uruguay after a 5-year break. Cheers broke out as Orsi took the oath of office before Congress today. Nicaragua is pulling out of the International Organization for Migration and the International Labour Organization. Vice President Rosario Murillo said these organizations no longer serve their original mission. This follows the country's withdrawal from the UN Human Rights Council after accusations of widespread repression. Argentina's President Javier Milei says a new deal with the International Monetary Fund is close. In a speech addressed to Congress, Milei urged lawmakers to back the agreement, though the deal isn't yet finalised. He highlighted his government's progress in reducing inflation. Milei's remarks come ahead of crucial midterm elections in October. The Trump administration's push to streamline the federal workforce continues, with a second round of emails demanding detailed weekly reports from federal employees. Agencies like the Department of Homeland Security are complying, while others, such as the State Department, are resisting. Let's take a closer look in this report.
The Trump administration has sent a second round of emails to federal workers, asking them to summarize their weekly accomplishments as part of ongoing efforts to assess and trim the federal workforce. Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency continues pushing federal employees for weekly reports on their job performance, with a warning that non-compliance could result in firings. The Trump administration's push to downsize the federal workforce continues, with around 100,000 employees already laid off and additional cuts expected in multiple government agencies. Critics argue that the widespread layoffs could disrupt essential government services, as key personnel are cut from departments like the FDA, Social Security Administration, and others. Agencies, including the Department of Homeland Security and the Justice Department, are following through with the mandatory reporting requests, while others like the State Department are resisting. Musk's team has targeted tech units such as the IS's 18F team for cuts, claiming the teams were non-critical despite their role in improving government services. Lawsuits are being filed against Musk and his Department of Government Efficiency, alleging violations of the U.S. Constitution as they push to overhaul federal agencies without Senate confirmations. Bureau Report, NewsX World.
That is all we have time for, but we'll be back very soon with more of your latest international news.